All right, joining me once again here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is my good friend Anne Elizabeth Moore. Anne is the founding editor of Best American Comics, the former editor of Punk Planet, a professor at the Art Institute of Chicago. She is the founder of Lady Drawers. She's the author of several books, including Unmarketable and Cambodian Girl. Her latest book, which you can find at AnneElizabethMoore.com, is New Girl Law, Drafting a Future for Cambodia. And thank you so much for being on the show again.
Oh, absolutely. I love your show.
All right, so Anne, this is the second book in a four-part series about your time in Cambodia. So let me just start out by asking, where exactly does the title of the book, New Girl Law, come from?
Sure. Well, um, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, Cambodia had a moral code written that essentially it's called the Chabab Sarai, and in Khmer, in Cambodian, and the English translation of it is girl law. And it actually laid out sort of a structure for young women to be properly feminine within Cambodian culture. And while it's a very sort of interesting didactic text that, essentially lays out very traditional gender roles for women, it also has some aspects that aren't very comfortable for young people growing up right now in Cambodia, especially in an emerging democracy and sort of trying to find new economic opportunities. And so in 2007, 2008, I was spending some time in Cambodia, and the young women that I was working with around self-publishing projects had actually decided to sort of re-look at the Chabab Sarai and rewrite it.
And these are the same young women you were with that we talked about in Cambodian Girl. They're at this dormitory, which essentially allows. It's very hard for young women in Cambodia to attend university. There's numerous kind of the sexist culture that prevents them, but the cost itself is very prohibitive, and so a dormitory was actually established that gives housing to young women so they can actually afford to attend university. And these are the same women that we talked about before that you talk about in this current book.
Exactly the same girls that we fell in love with in Cambodian Girl, self-publishing in Phnom Penh. But what's interesting about the Chabab Sarai, of course, is that it starts to outline why it's so difficult for young women to go to school in Cambodia and why they have lesser economic opportunities than men in Cambodian culture. And so in many ways for them to want to take the Chabab Sarai, excuse me, and re-envision it and sort of rewrite it for a new generation was entirely about them looking at their own history within this culture and trying to open it up for more young women to have more opportunities in the future.
And you actually, what you guys actually did, you actually rewrote the rules. What are some of the rules, and kind of talk about some of the rules they came up with, some of the ones that you might find. There's some surprising ones, there's some inspiring ones. What are some of the rules that they came up with?
Yeah, well, the first one is the one that when people ask me what they came up with is the one I have to sort of admit to right away, because it was definitely the hardest one for me, which was to be patient. And this is actually in the original Chabab Sarai. In fact, it's sort of the subtext throughout the Chabab Sarai is that women should, not sort of push for change and not really even take an advocacy role, but actually just really adopt a very patient, understanding stance, which is not my way. So when they sort of, out of the gate were like, we totally want to rewrite the Chabab Sarai, but under this first condition are the ways that we will look at this historical text, I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what is going on here. So that one was really, set the tone for this new thing. But some of the others, the Chabab Sarai, it sort of allows for domestic violence and, as I mentioned, decreased economic opportunities for women in Cambodian culture, as well as sort of women's limited social roles. And one of the things that the young women that I was working with were really interested in doing is flipping some of that, and So, for example, one of their rules was that girls should be brave enough to make eye contact with and speak to boys, which only makes sense if you understand that the Chabab Sarai itself actually has a stipulation that says that women should not look boys in the eye. And so, as we were talking about these things in our future about like, well, I want to manage a bank. I want to have a role in government. I want to, run an NGO. As we had talked about them before doing this project where we were rewriting the Chabab Sarai, it would have been extremely difficult for them to actually do those jobs unless they were allowed to look boys and men in the eye. And so as they started to parse out these individual ways this text had affected their culture, they began to see what kinds of things they might have to think through in order to just live their lives.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and there's like obviously ones that are sort of basic, just like, women should be allowed to be educated alongside boys. Women should be allowed to have positions in government alongside boys. But you actually had some interesting ones. One of the ones that I found kind of interesting was actually when you asked them if women should work to gain physical strength, and when you actually kind of had this. I'll let you describe it because it's a very interesting conversation that came down.
Yeah, and they were basically like, no, they shouldn't. That's a terrible idea.
Right.
And what that's about is not something that we value in American feminism. It's about sort of understanding that there may be gendered ways of being in the world and sort of respecting those divisions and not needing to cross all of them, but still sort of retaining a way in which sort of masculine physical strength can still be valuable in their idea of a future for women. The other one that was that still stays with me was when I was with one of the young women. We were in the store and we were shopping, and it was all women in the store. And we had just been talking about like, well, women should get out of the home more and they should, do things that keep them busy and not having to make food all the time.
And you asked where the boys were at the shopping center, and the girl, the woman you were with, cracked up and found it was the most like funny thing she's ever heard in her life, essentially, right?
Basically. And she was like, that's crazy talk. How can you even ask that? Why would boys be shopping? And it was like, well, because they're going to need to shop if you're going to be working in government all day, or what kind of a weird home life are you going to have where you're, working 20 hours a day? And so just thinking through with them all of these different, influences of both the Chabab Sarai and what these economic changes might mean for them was really totally fascinating.